you know, maybe this won't be traumatizing.
Oh shit, she's waking up! Hey, hold her down!
Yeah, that's on me. I've seen the Owl House. Clearly, Dana Terrence without SMP breathing down her neck was going to be unhinged. Knights of Guinevere feels like one massive F you to Disney, and I adore how that's not even close to being the most interesting thing going on with this story. Also, hi for those of you who are here via autoplay. Welcome. Go watch the show if you haven't already, it's pretty good. Does it have its issues? Well, no, not really. Some personal preferences here or there, but as a first episode of a much bigger story, Knights of Guinevere, or COG, which very clever, is a slow build into horror with a lovable if emotionally unwell cast trying to survive all of it, with an even more emotionally unwell villain who is just a child who never grew up, is now trying to tear the world apart to get her toy back. If you haven't seen the episode yet, this is your chance to do so. For everyone else, pull up a chair, as this is going to be my yappings on COG, or as it should be called, thank Christ, an adult animated series that doesn't feel like a sitcom.
Come, princess.
Now context, as if you don't hear from me, the rest of the internet will try and trick you into believing that this show is the sole brainchild of Owl House creator Dana Terrence. A legend, but not the sole creator in this case, as it was in fact co-created alongside Zach Marcus and John Bailey, not the dude from Bridgerton Owen. This distinction is very important to me, as I still vividly remember the pain of doing group projects and only getting a fraction of the credit. But now that I vaguely acknowledge that the other two exist, I can now just go back to saying, oh, the writing, as that's just easier to say. This story begins like most fairy tales do. We hear the story of a princess who is held captive in a tower, putting on a fake smile, and for the briefest of instances, you be forgiven for thinking that the princess in this narration is the child. Except no, she's actually the beast. This intro is incredibly interesting to me. It's also the center of one of my hottest takes about this episode that I'm gonna save for later. But aside from the bait and switch plus a very solid hook to the series of how, yeah, the android jumped off the roof, my main takeaway here is just how quickly it establishes Olivia's character. She is the main villain, and we see her as a child before we see her just looking very unwell. I'm gonna do a full video on her later, but her main deal at a glance seems to be that she suffers from a case of arrested development. We see how as a child she was quiet and withdrawn, torturing Gwen and treating a robot that displays an obvious degree of sentience, else she wouldn't be trying to escape, as a possession, dragging her around by the guts, with even her own father begging her to let go of the past and not, you know, stop torturing the robot. And he decides, okay, I can't really deal with this, so he decides to gift her with an amusement park and obscene levels of wealth. But when we see her decades later, Olivia, well, to put it bluntly, it seems like she wasted her life. She never seems to have grown up, still surrounds herself with the same toys and decorations she had as a child, still eating sugary cereals that are chucked across the floor, having balloons set up for herself, and being treated by a bunch of Chuck E. Cheese looking machines that seem like they're there like, oh, to ease kids, but they look creepy as shit. I find all this character work very interesting. I do think a lot of it could have been just implied by her bedriddenness, but the opening does provide a good twist on a classic fairy tale opening, with us discovering who the actual heroine is here, and all the gore we can expect from this series. But to summarize my thoughts, I find it insanely funny that this man saw his grieving child torturing a robot and decided to give her a kingdom and fat stacks versus therapy, with us then rolling through a montage that I'm mostly just gonna let the round table break down, as y'all don't need two nerds in your ears telling you to know about how the hair spike makes Gwen look too violent as a jab at like all the crazy rules, restrictions, and attempts by companies to try and avoid trouble by becoming bubble wrap safe and creating the most bland corporate slop imaginable. We could have gotten more interesting and strange projects, like this one.
You know what happens when you break the rules.
Now, I joked about it before, but I don't actually mind when a lot of adult animated shows go the sitcom comedy route. It's tried and true, makes a fuck ton of money when done well, and goes on for years. But what annoys me is when interesting or cool stories are forced into this mold. We saw this most famously with Final Space, an indie pilot turned full series that got clearly butchered to a certain extent by just demands to make it feel more like everything else that was being made at the time, with it only really being now, with the rise rise of independent studios like Glitch that we finally have been able to see creators being given the chance to go completely buck wild. Glitch is allowing people to tell their own stories, and that has led to some truly interesting media that I have really come to appreciate. I also love how right now it seems like the only people making cartoons for teenagers are indies, so I'm really happy that something like COG exists, especially when it's throwing shade at companies like Disney, with this montage pretty much telling you everything you need to know about the fucked up balance of this world. That Park Planet exists as an amusement park. Kids, families, they all come to visit. It's a center of a media empire, with Gwen being the mascot of it all, but in practice, she's less Mickey Mouse and more Barbie. She's a toy that is constantly being modeled, changed to just be mass marketed to kids, even getting some reboot actions that of course trolls hate. But those comments never mattered, as yeah, parents are spending their money. Cue the reveal of the factories and waste that this industry creates. The park may sell a fantasy, but it's built off the back of an exploited and impoverished populace, with people getting by sifting through the park's scraps just to sell it right back to the park. This place seems to be a source of a lot of their suffering. In fact, it's polluting their air and water. I don't know how else you explain the blue children and people coughing up blue blood. It exists, it's clearly not a net positive for those actually working it and working under it, but the entire economy of this town is built around it. Hence the tension between those who work for the park versus those who don't.
We are all victims of the park, but everyone's so busy picking apart each other, they don't see the corporate hand at the wheel. You think a cog like me has power?
This is Andy, and I love her, mainly because she's kind of full of shit. Going back through the episode, it's kind of surprising when you realize just how selfish Andy actually is. She's not a terrible person, but if we're looking at what she says and how she acts, you start to realize that, oh, baby, you are kind of up to no good and mainly looking after yourself. Clearly, she and Frankie care about each other, they're childhood friends. But picking through those interactions, you start to notice some potentially worrying patterns. It starts bright and early with the whole Crownie situation, where despite her saying some real shit about, yeah, the rich are pitting the lower classes against each other, you kind of quickly realize that, she's not really saying that because she believes it. She's saying it because it's utter cope.
Oh, nice. What fixed it?
Oh, a hunch.
This line of thinking that, oh, I'm just doing it to survive, man, that seems to be her dogma throughout most of the episode. She's just doing what she has to do because she wants to survive just like anyone else. Thus rendering her supposed lines about, oh yeah, we need to work together to be kind of extremely hollow, as when she's fired from her job, well, her first instinct is just try and get the hell out of Dodge. Looking at a bunch of posters about, oh, space travel, tours, aka we will get you away from this shithole, she is super okay with leaving all this and all these people behind. We're like, yeah, she is looking after herself, which, understandable, we totally get it, but the fact that she is trying to say such high-minded stuff when really she's just being denied service, it does hint to a selfishness that is kind of reinforced throughout the episode. And the thing that really gets me is that Frankie's the one who figured out how to fix the droid head. Andy was complaining like could not get that thing to work, then Frankie gave a suggestion which Andy had like this flash recognition like, oh, that is a dumb way to do this system, I should try that, like, oh, it's suddenly working. And rather than telling Frankie like, oh yeah, you were right, she just plays off and goes, oh yeah, just had a feeling, which really makes me think of how much has Andy done that has really just been Frankie's work. I mean, Andy does seem kind of weird about the whole idea that Frankie might end up working with her at the park one day, and maybe it's just she knows that this wouldn't be a great fit for her personality, where she does like the idea that she was able to get this job while others couldn't. But even all that aside, when they're downstairs in the basement, when she's talking about like, oh yeah, what plan they're gonna do, it does sound like she's talking about Sparky's plan. She's not referring to this as like, oh, we can help Frankie get a job. She's like, oh, we can all get paid if we sell this robot, which doesn't come up in this episode, but it could become very prevalent in the next. Andy, I don't think, is a horrible person, but she is interesting thanks to these flaws. I'm curious to see how her friendship with Frankie will be tested by the presence of Gwen, who you know is gonna ask them for help, which Frankie is gonna provide, leaving, well, Andy to be making some serious life decisions. As yeah, she is dying. Maybe she doesn't know, maybe she does. But I like the balance between Andy, this cynical realist, and how that's contrasted with Frankie's sense of wonder and optimism, who is also hallucinating.
Doesn't matter what model she is, you need to go back for her.
Okay, I'm calling this now. Frankie is gonna be the real Disney princess of this story. Knights of Guinevere has already had fun switching some of these typical fantasy roles around. Olivia is the evil queen rather than the damsel in distress, so I can see Gwen being the knight rather than the other two, which would leave Butch Timmy Turner over here to be the one actually displaying the qualities we associate with a Disney heroine. If this show is a musical, Frankie would be the one singing the I Want song about how she dreams of working at the park and bringing joy to children. Frankie is the one, kind of, with animal companions, and this endearing sense of optimism about the world. Andy is consumed by the job, hates the stress, and how overworked she is. Meanwhile, Frankie, despite working multiple jobs and experiencing the soul-crushing machine firsthand, working at a factory that produces merch shifting through the trash that gets dumped on the city, none of it dampers Frankie's spirits and this childlike sense of wonder about the park, believing in the fantasy and joy that it brings to children and how that makes all of this worthwhile, even as the park seems to poison those who live in its shadow. Which might be the point, as yeah, Parkland, Park World. It seems to be very fun, kids get a lot out of it, but beneath the escapism is a toxic, soul-crushing corporate machine, and that's just what it is. But that nostalgia, that love of like what it's doing for people, that sets up someone like Frankie to be exploited, and God, I wish I could remember the actual name for this term, but I read it or saw it somewhere before. But there is an actual term for this in the real world, but abusing people's nostalgia for the company has been something that Disney has been accused of for a while now. Using people's fond memories of the media it created, leveraging the fact that what its employees do will be seen by a new generation of kids, allowing Disney to make people work long hours in extreme conditions, only to spit them out once they're done using them. This probably would have been Frankie's fate if she had been hired, but there's one other thing that the story is doing in giving Frankie this borderline naive and childlike way of viewing things, which is that the story is setting up her to be a foil for Olivia.
Bring her back, won't you? Oh, bring her back.
Olivia clearly hasn't mentally grown since she was young. Maybe she was able to better hide it when she was an adult, but now she's just a dying old woman. She's throwing tantrums over Gwen finally escaping her, pleading with what is probably robots to find her. With the overall decor of the room, all the stuff scattered around it, and the blunt message from her dad about letting go of the past, this all makes me think that Olivia is meant to be seen as someone who never emotionally grew up, which will explain her possessive and controlling behavior, how she has tied so much of her psyche onto Gwen. The story might be using Olivia to examine the darker aspects of fantasy and wish fulfillment, and how refusing to grow up and letting yourself get unhealthily attached to a piece of media that once provided comfort when you were a child, that could lead to some very maladjusted individuals, with Frankie being the more positive spin on these ideas, and maybe the one to avoid the same pitfalls. Both of them have an emotional connection to Gwen that was started when they were kids. Meeting Gwen and fixing her finger seems to be a core memory for Frankie, hence this strong desire to help her. And while we're in that neighborhood, Frankie, well, her mental state feels like Red Flag City.
Do it, Francesca. Bite the hand that feeds.
Clearly, she has a heart of gold, but the hallucinations, not just talking to the toys, but imagining how the room has lights on and watching a commercial that isn't playing, taking a moment to realize that Andy is even in the room, it all makes me very concerned for Frankie, especially when we see how these fantasies motivate her actions. Talk her into fixing Gwen, saying it's not stealing, it's rescuing, then going on to anthropomorphize Gwen, giving her traits that she doesn't yet know Gwen is capable of.
She seemed sad when we locked her in there. Couldn't move or speak.
Maybe Frankie is a low-grade technopath, and I hope so, as otherwise it means her grasp on reality is porous at best, which is, you know, not great, especially when she had a boss who's been pulling her teeth out.
You know what happens when you break the rules.
My most controversial opinion is that if I was in this world and if I was on this crew, I would 100% be on Sparky's side here. Frankie, I am sorry, we're stopping you from chasing your dreams, but that robot is life-changing money, and unlike that potential job, we can split cash. Like, it's terrible to say, but it's true. Though, it shouldn't go without saying that Sparky, not a great dude, yes, he's into men, still terrible fucking person. I love how he thought like, oh, maybe he's a gruff mentor type, but no, he's been ripping out people's teeth and a drug dealer. But I'm mainly concerned about the ripping out the teeth parts. But I digress. I have no idea how much of a relevant player is going to be in this story. Love his voice actor, but he could show up once after this, or he could be like a major player. I'm not entirely sure. But when it's all said and done, he is a cruel man in a cruel world, and I am enjoying both. Which, to talk about the animation, I quite enjoyed it. Does it feel like they're missing an extra frame or two here or there? Yeah, but it conveys absolutely everything it needs to. The characters are expressive, the nightmare feel that is the robot's innards is extremely disturbing, with probably my favorite aspect of the show being how just it manages to master atmosphere. When this show wants to convey dread, it nails it. When we see Olivia's room when she's older, how the robots stand around her, the lack of color in the underground, while it never does anything too fancy, when it's just like, okay, what's the vibe of the scene? It nails it every single time. I think in a visual sense, that is my biggest praise for it. All the characters seem great. I do wish we kind of got more of Guinevere herself. Also, I've been saying Gwen and Guinevere non-stop this video, I feel like, and I apologize for either. But Guinevere, she spends nearly the entirety of her screen time either mute or a memory where it's slightly ambiguous how much of what she's doing is actually her, which I do think offers up some of its own intrigue. As Gwen's narration mentions how she would be playing games, but while doing so, she would be pretending that she wasn't scared, which could have certain implications. We still don't fully know what her actual personality is and what is just the facade, or if there is a facade. She really might be this kind and princess type, or she can be a more hardened being underneath the surface. Right now I'm leaning towards a mix of both, hence why I'm like, okay, what is actually her and what is her programming, or does it not matter since she's both? It does seem like there's currently limits placed upon what she can do based on her programming, as she can do what she wants, but it only happens very briefly and seems to take a great amount of effort. She's only able to muster up a scream to alert the others that the night is coming, but it's only when Frankie and Andy were in danger that she was able to fully act of her own free will, possibly pointing to the idea that Gwen can do more when she's working within the parameters of her programming, just not as intended, as there might be something of a stranger danger protocol that is meant for her to protect little kids when they're on their own, with this allowing her to use her full strength against the knight with a messed up arm, only to go back to being catatonic once the two were safe, as otherwise her programming might demand that she go back to the park. I do wonder what makes this Gwen special, as her memory is stored in the cloud, so technically every version of Gwen should have the desire to escape, but it seems like Olivia has been breaking and rebuilding the same android all this time, with a 0 on her chest hinting that she's some kind of prototype and may have been the first, opening up questions on if this is the only version of Gwen that can have like true displays of autonomy, not just whispered words, or if there's some other thing that makes this version of her special. As to put this in perspective, Gwen, from what we understand, is still trapped. If Olivia starts torturing another android and her connection to the cloud isn't broken, she will simultaneously be free and a prisoner, experiencing both at once, so until that link is broken or Olivia is stopped, Gwen won't know peace. Which could be the basis for group conflict, as Andy wants to just tell him to run away, while Frankie could be pushing Gwen to save the other parts of herself.
No, she helped us! We have to help her!
Functionally, despite being named pilot, this out of all of Glitch's recent projects feels like a true episode 1. It doesn't feel like it's trying so hard to pitch the series, its world, and its potential. No, it's the first episode of a much longer series displaying a confidence that I really appreciate. Though I'm not knocking the others for how they handled their premieres. Both approaches have their strengths, with COD going for a much slower introduction to the world and its characters. If you're not a fan of seeing messed up shit, I'm afraid this probably won't be the show for you. However, I for one am seated, as I really want to see what happens next. I think this episode nailed what it's going for, preparing us for a story about exploitation, damaged individuals, and the desire for freedom. Though if you'll indulge me, I do have some notes that are percolating at the back of my brain, so just get these out of the way and I'm sure everyone's gonna be chill about this. Look, I like this episode, but it's giving episode 1 of a 2-part opener. I didn't hate how it ended, but without a bigger climax to really cap everything off, where we leave off, like, oh, the seeming Gwen coming back online and hallucinating the others as kids, it does feel a little abrupt. It ends on what is basically its softest note, leaving me with less, oh, I need to know what happens next, to, oh, there was supposed to be another half here. Which is a bit ironic since my other note is that I think this episode kinda gives a little too much away too quickly. When I first watched the trailer and it was just all vibes, no plot, I was so excited, as yeah, I'm tired of trailers giving away everything in the first 5 seconds. So this just going for minimalism, that worked for me. It led to a lot of mystery and curiosity on where things were going. But then, by the end of the first episode, I did in fact feel like I knew too much. Like legit, the only burning question I had by the time credits rolled is, okay, what's the deal with Frankie's hallucination? hallucinations. Most everything else gave us more than enough context to infer what the answers might be. The machines probably have some biological component to them, hence just the infection in the humans giving them blue blood. The same blue that's in the machines. We don't know where Guinevere came from, we have concept art, but I'm willing to bet money that she was based on Olivia's mother, whose death is what caused a child's arrested development and obsession. With this episode reminding me in a lot of ways of Tangled, where just like Tangled, I think if you cut the opening scene, it immediately makes the rest of the story way more interesting. As suddenly, we don't know what Guinevere is. We're questioning what's the deal with the robot and like how and why did it end up outside the park? Is it just glitching out or is it actually trying to communicate with Frankie to get help? Olivia goes from us basically knowing most of her deal to this strange dying old woman pleading for her robot to be brought back to her, all the while the details of the room imply a childlike mental state. As she is throwing a tantrum, she has bowls of sugary cereal surrounding her that she threw onto the floor. With us not knowing the exact answer for why she's like this, creating more intrigue, as while we can guess, we wouldn't be so confident in knowing what her deal is, as we wouldn't have her dad begging her to let go of the past. I like the opening, I really do. It makes for a good opener and it's a good hook for the rest of the show, but I'm not sure those things were fully worth the trade-off. As all this info being revealed right in the opening, I feel like all of it could have been revealed in much smaller moments just throughout the episode, giving us little oh shits as suddenly the pieces fall into place, adding a new sense of surprise to something like Guinevere standing up to face a monster for the first time, as we didn't know she could do this, versus in the actual show where, oh yeah, we knew she was capable of it, we just didn't know why. We also didn't know she could kick its ass, but since that happened off screen, we're still missing that extra oomph. But with all that said, those are really my only two notes. If Digital Circus has taught me anything, it's that stories can easily become great after getting more than one episode. Things that seem a little lackluster at the start can become purposeful and amazing, with us only needing a little patience and waiting to see what happens next.